first of all, let me test the volume. Everybody, if you need up or down, just let me know. But if the volume works okay for everybody, I can keep going. Before I get into the Nature Center, I think I'd like to take a moment and ask each of you to think about a time in your life where you really had a great memory outdoors. So if you just take just a moment and reflect about some time where you had a positive experience outdoors or in nature, and just keep that with you as we talk. So I'll give you just 10 seconds or so to think about that. You know, so many of our children, whether they were growing up today, like my kids are, or maybe several decades ago, faced the opportunity to stay inside. And you don't use opportunity in a positive manner. You know, many of the positive memories I have as a child growing up, actually in Virginia, in the mountains, were time where I was learning outside, whether I was playing with friends or whether I was growing just around the neighborhood in the forest by myself. I fondly recall the opportunity to be outside. And what I didn't know as I was tromping through the woods as a 10-year-old is the self-reliance skills that I was learning, the social skills, working with other people, the creativity of working in nature and the outdoors. And so think about your own memory that you had, and think about the impact that the time that you had growing up, either outdoors, whether it was just a small amount or a very large amount. Think about that impact that it had on you. And now think about how many of children nowadays don't have the opportunity to get outside, whether it's because of changing family dynamics where it's not prioritized, whether it's due to increased screen time on phones or iPads or computers, or whether it's just due to the fact that suburbia has taken over in many of our neighborhoods and we have less nature and outdoors available to us to go and explore and learn. And that's really where Indian Creek Nature Center came from. In fact, as we sit here, as you can obviously see, 50 years, our 50-year anniversary is what we're celebrating in 2023. But the challenges that our founders faced 50 years ago were some of those that I just talked about. How many people have ever been to Indian Creek Nature Center in this room so far? I always like to gauge, okay, so about half of you. So you may have heard me speak, you may have heard other staff or my predecessors speak, but allow me a little bit of indulgence to tell you about our founders for a few minutes. We were founded by two women in 1973. They were volunteers, always were volunteers. Their names were Beebe Staymates and Jean O'Donnell. And the Staymates and O'Donnell families are still involved in Cedar Rapids and the Eastern Island community today. But these two women actually saw their children spending more time on screens in the early 70s. Because ever since the advent of the radio, we have been focused on spending more time inside around devices. Of course, I'm too young to remember this, but I hear Sunday afternoons around the radio before TV was even a thing. There are so many devices that are designed to get people inside and keep them inside. So these two women, these two visionaries, saw that challenge that their own kids were facing. And they said, we need something in Iowa that can help with that. So they did their research, and they ultimately, after visiting several nature centers up in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, they decided to come back to Indian Creek Nature Center, or come back to Cedar Rapids and start Indian Creek Nature Center in 1973. And for the first 43 years of our life, this was our home. So if you've been to the Nature Center anytime before 2016, this was what you would walk up to. This is actually an old dairy barn that was built in 1932, so it's 91 years old. This dairy barn was built and operated by the Penningroth family, and it was the dairy barn where all the glass milk bottles to your front step came from in Cedar Rapids. And it was truly a well-constructed cow barn that was used for milking. There were pasture all around, the trees were not there. And for several decades, it was used for agricultural purposes. But lo and behold, in the 60s, they faced the same problems we face now. There was a flood that actually devastated this area. And the city of Cedar Rapids said, we'd like to buy this building, this land from the farmer to protect it, to create greenway space. Because right down to the right-hand side of this building is our namesake, Indian Creek. Indian Creek flows from north of Marion, Robbins, Hiawatha area, winds through Marion, winds through Cedar Rapids, and actually just on the other side of this building spills out into the Cedar River. So Indian Creek, so this barn, this nature center sits on the confluence of the Indian Creek and Cedar River. It is very prone to flooding, so the city bought it. And I wanted to use it as protected space so that it wouldn't have a house, so it wouldn't be developed, so it would be good greenway space. And for about a decade, it sat empty. It sat as an old cow barn with nothing happening with it. And these two women, Bibi and Jean, as they were thinking about where they could house their nature center, they approached the city of Cedar Rapids and convinced them that this old dairy barn would be a perfect location for what would become one of the best-in-class nature centers in the entire country. And so they convinced the city to let them have that. And so for 43 of our 50 years, this two-story dairy barn was renovated to be a nature center. But if you've ever been in a barn, you will know absolutely 100% that you can never turn a barn completely into an occupiable building. So my office was on the second floor of this building for a few years before we moved, and let me say that it was very common for me to have nature visitors in my office. Slimy little, they're not slimy, but squiggly little snakes, I mean, you know, that get really big, or the mice or the rodents. They all had a home in here due to it being an old barn that you can keep things out. I'll come back to the building in a minute, but I did want to put this in front of you. So Indian Creek Nature Center was founded in 1973. And over the past 50 years, we've had over 2 million visitors to the property. So I want to just throw, this is the only number slide that I have as part of my presentation, but I just wanted to share a few things about us. Founded in 1973, we are actually Iowa's first nonprofit nature center. And what that means is that we do not receive any direct tax allocation. So we're not a tax-funded entity. And that's really important for us because it allows us flexibility to be innovative. And as I'll talk to a little bit more about what Sarah was referencing in a minute, it allows us to be innovative. It allows us to invest in some areas that truly provide leadership in certain areas. Iowa's first nonprofit nature center. We remain only one of 2 private nonprofit nature centers in Iowa. And we are, we serve over 81,000 guests annually, now have over 500 acres of land under our management, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Rely very significantly on volunteers. Over 800 volunteers per year come out and volunteer at the Nature Center, and 42 staff. So, before I move on to the next slide and start talking a little bit more about our vision, I want to take a moment, another minute to talk about myself, but also to give you the opportunity to ask questions. And so whether it's, you raise your hand in the middle of my conversation, please feel free to do that. This can be very informal. And then I'll also have time at the end. Did you have one?
Yes. Are those 42 staff members paid?
They are, yes. Now they're not all full-time. That includes all of our seasonal work as well as our part-time work. Yes?
You ever had any issue with water?
We do, and I will be happy to talk about that in a few minutes, unless there's a direct follow-up question. Okay.
You didn't say anything, just that it was.
Yep. So I'll get to the 2008 flood here in just a moment. Yes, sir.
For me, I've not been there. What do you define as a nature center?
Great question. So nature centers are place-based organizations. And what I mean by that is they are organizations that are designed around a specific piece of land or a specific building, and they're designed to get people outside. They have everything from trails to educational programs to some nature centers, not ours, but some actually have overnight accommodations where you can come in, or school field trips can come in and spend a week learning in the outdoor environment. So there's a wide variety. The nature center movement really got going in the 60s and the 70s, and the focus was always on how do we get more people engaged into the outdoors? How do we educate and inspire people into the outdoors? And that led to over 1,800 nature centers now throughout the United States that exist in some form whatsoever. Yes, ma'am.
Are the 500 acres of land all contiguous?
They are not, no. And in fact, we've got several different tracks, and I will expand on that momentarily. All right, so I want to tell you a little bit about my journey to this role, just very briefly, because in the end, it's not about me or any one staff member, but or certainly any one volunteer. But I am, in the past 50 years, this organization has only had 3 directors. The first director, his name was Kurt Abdush, and he was around for the first 4 years of the organization's life. The second, who you may be familiar with, his name was Rich Patterson, and he was around for 36 years of the organization. And then, if you do the math, I am now celebrating my 10th year at Indian Creek Nature Center as a director. My path came to Indian Creek not with a biology major or a naturalist background. My path came kind of with no real plan. Going to college, I was getting a degree in business with no real understanding of what I wanted to do. And I got a job part-time at a nonprofit in Cedar Rapids. It was a youth shelter that served runaway youth. And the reason I tell that is because I really found my passion for combining business and leadership skills with nonprofits that are very mission-focused and serve the greater good, and whether that's people, the environment, animals, whatever that is. So I found that connection and that passion, and saw that so many organizations, nonprofit organizations, were focused on what they couldn't do because they didn't have enough money, they didn't have enough time and resources or people, and that held them back for a lot of things. And so coming to Indian Creek Nature Center was not something that was on my radar. Most recently, before this role, I worked for the Boy Scouts, providing the Boy Scouting program for at-risk youth. And I am an Eagle Scout as well, have that outdoor love and passion. And I mention all of that to say that the skills that I bring to this job are different than the rest of the staff members on our team. We have all of the very focused naturalists, scientists, biologists on our team who do the work day in and day out. So if you have a very specific biology question, I'm not your guy, but I can actually find the answer for you if need be. So for many years, as we lived in that dairy barn, we built such great camaraderie within the community. And our goal was first and foremost around youth-based education. And so since the very beginning in the 70s, our focus was on creating partnerships with the Cedar Rapids school districts and other school districts to bring out all of their kids to a field trip once per year. In fact, for many years, Cedar Rapids, every fifth grader in Cedar Rapids had to come to a nature center field trip as part of their science curriculum. And so we, as an organization, were designed to provide that experience in nature. To take kids, most often during the school day, have them come out to the nature center, traverse our prairies, traverse the wetlands, the creeks, traverse the forests, and explore. Whether that's formally just looking around for a certain type of insect that's on their study list, or spending time in journaling in nature, art and science and literary are very important subjects for many of the folks, the teachers who come out and use the nature center. So while I talk about biology, it's actually much more than that in many respects. So we served very, very well for a number of years. However, as we aged in the 80s, we knew that we needed to continue to expand. The amount of land that we had as an organization was not keeping up with the amount of demand that we had for field trips and for others. So we added more property through conversation with the neighbors. We added contiguous land that was next to this barn, and we were able to do two things with that. First, we were able to create some trails. We were able to create trails specifically that were designed to get people out throughout the property. And second, we were able to actually restore some prairie to these old farm grounds that we had purchased. And I'll actually talk about prairie and the importance of that in just a few minutes. But as we transitioned throughout the 80s and the 90s, we continued to see growth in our attendance. Throughout the late 90s, we were about 35,000 people a year were coming through the Nature Center property. And the dairy barn was growing out of its size. And so for a number of years, beginning in about 99, and extended all the way up until 07, a lot of our governing boards had conversations about different ways that we could expand or add on to this building in order to support the growth of programming and more people wanting to come out. And then, of course, in 08, a major flood hit. And I know that it's no secret to anyone here, but that flood was certainly devastating even to Indian Creek Nature Center. This building is high enough that it only got 1.5 foot of water in it. But I say only because it is very significant and caused our future governance and our future leadership to rethink whether or not we wanted to actually expand this building. The flood was actually, as you'll find in some of our other crises, the flood ended up being a good thing for us for two reasons specifically. The first is that it brought our staff and our volunteers together in a way, and we never missed a beat on programming. So even though our main building had flooded, almost immediately afterwards, our staff erected a tent and continued to do summer camp programming June, July, and August when many other places shut down. The second thing that it did is it gave us the opportunity to restore this barn in an ecological manner. So rather than just tear out all the drywall and the insulation and put it back that was there, our leadership at the time decided that now was a great time to be able to showcase some opportunities for sustainable building and sustainable construction. And so rather than put back in just normal fiberglass insulation, they actually put in soy-based foam insulation. They did things throughout this building. They took the opportunity to put in all LED lights before many people even were talking about LED lights. They did some things that provided leadership as an organization to improve and better our interactions with the environment. So the flood, while certainly devastating for so many people, became a blessing for the Nature Center because it continued a path of sustainable construction, and it showed that the Nature Center was resilient enough to continue to do programming, to continue to come through during times of crisis. But it did change the direction of where our leadership decided to go with expanding our programming. In 2009, 10, 11, there was no doubt in anybody's mind that a new building was needed in order to accommodate the growth. And there was no doubt in anybody's mind that my predecessor was reaching retirement age and that they would have to look at a transition. So in 2013, I was hired with the direction to do two things. First, continue to make Indian Creek Nature Center a viable space for the community to be educated and inspired to protect the outdoors. Second was to make it so that the Nature Center was no longer a hidden gem. And I say that because so many folks used to refer to the Nature Center as a hidden gem, but that hidden piece meant that there were people that didn't know about us. There were so many people from even down in Iowa City who maybe shared some of the same principles as the Nature Center, but never had the opportunity to come up because they weren't aware of it. And so one of the charges that our board put forth before I ever joined was to find ways to make and increase the Nature Center's relevance. And so that led to the construction of Amazing Space. And Amazing Space is the home of the Nature Center now, beginning in 2016. We moved in here. But there was no doubt in my mind, because our board, Rich, my predecessor, many of our volunteers said we need more space. We need to grow. We need to do a campaign in order to figure out what's next. However, there really wasn't a strong sense of what a new building needed to achieve for the Nature Center. And so as I learned a lot from my predecessor, I really started to pick up the nature of sustainability and how important that has been throughout the Nature Center's history. Indian Creek Nature Center was the first organization in the state of Iowa in the 90s to install net-metered solar panels with Alliant Energy. So there's a tremendous amount of leadership that they've shown in previous decades to sustainability. And I knew that in order for us to do something really focused on meeting our mission, we had to build a building that was more than just a LEED building. So if you're not familiar, I think most people are, but a LEED building is a building that is designed to be better than just our standard building code. And in fact, allow me to show that here on this next slide. If these lines may be hard to read, but this baseline here is what we call building code. This is what we call green building, which is actually green is a color, not a term of definition. So nobody really knows what green building is, but that's there. And then what high performance, so LEED building. So if you're looking at this axis here, and this is a negative, a LEED building actually still has a negative environmental impact. It is better than a building built to code, but it still has a negative environmental impact. So as an organization who has for decades believed in making the environment a better place and being very focused on the environment and teaching people about it, we knew that building a LEED building was actually not going to be something that was the leadership that future generations needed. So we sought out a program called the Living Building Challenge. It is an organization, or it's a certification that is similar to LEED, except in only that it is a program that's designed to increase sustainability. Except it is designed, as you can pick up, to have a positive regenerative impact. So when you build a negative, or you build a building on code or on LEED, you're still having a negative environmental impact. When you build a living building, you actually have a positive impact. The most simple thing and the most challenging, of course, is energy when we talk about that. So allow me to illustrate this. LEED buildings can have solar panels or renewable energy of any type associated with them, but they can still have a negative environmental impact because they're not producing everything that you're using. Living buildings, which is what Amazing Space is required to produce all of its own energy from renewable sources. And so through a partnership with Alliant Energy, we actually have, and you can see some of the solar panels on our roof there, and then we have a whole field of solar panels. We produce about 20% more energy than we consume in a year's period. So we are a net zero energy building. We produce all of our own energy on site with solar, and we don't have a negative draw from power plants. That is not easy. There's a lot of people that say that back in 2014 said that wasn't possible. But we knew it was the right thing to do, and while the net zero energy buildings have not grown substantially, we do know that there are more and more coming on throughout the United States and throughout Iowa, and what that means is that those buildings are not having a negative drain on our environmental resources. So energy is only one thing, or one description of a living building. We put together a plan that included a focus on the entire building, not just energy, but how could we build a building that did not have a negative environmental impact. It was a really important piece to ours. Now it's a standard building, and I have a few pictures that I'll show you in a minute about the classroom spaces and the exhibit space and the gift shop and the auditorium and different things that we have as a community center. But we could have built those things in a non-sustainable manner. We really chose to commit to the Living Building Challenge so that we could be a leader. And that's a key distinction when you get down to why I mentioned the fact that we're a nonprofit a little while ago. Government entities, rightfully so, have a tremendous amount of focus on low costs, and so building a building that's sustainable is not always possible within a governmental entity, because the building that you see here actually cost about $1 million more because of the level of sustainability. It's a 12,000 square foot building. We could have built it for $4 million, but it ended up costing $5 million, a little bit more than that, $5 million, in order to do it in a sustainable manner that didn't have a negative environmental impact. But there are other things besides solar energy. So if you've been up to this space, you will know that there is, in the back of the building, there's a glass bird viewing room. And when we asked the community members and our constituents, our volunteers, our participants, what they wanted to see about a new nature center, resoundingly they said we would like a place to come and interact with nature, to view the birds, to participate in programs on ornithology. And so we built one of those in. However, we were very concerned about creating a glass room on the back of our building and having these nice experiences for people to come out. And as they were sitting there, they'd have a bird fly right into the glass and fall down dead. That's very counterintuitive. That's not what we're going for. So our architect said, let's put stickers or etchings or film on the glass in order to protect the birds. And we actually said, you know, that may work, but it inhibits a person's right to view nature. And we don't want to, creating the space, we do not want to create a barrier for people to view nature. So lo and behold, through some research, we actually learned that a bird does not fly into a spider's web. So a bird does not fly into a spider's web because a spider emits a chemical in its web which reflects ultraviolet rays. The birds see that and actually divert away from the spider web. So we incorporated glass on the right that was designed based upon the principles of the spider's web. Those little filaments you can actually look up and see from the outside, and you'll see the birds see an ultraviolet reflecting filament. From the inside, it is completely transparent and does not block or inhibit views. It is the only product in the entire building that is not from the United States. It is manufactured currently in Germany, and we had to get exception to have a non-American, more specifically non-local product in the building. But it was an important enough investment in us for nature and the outdoors that we're able to protect the birds and the animals that we put that glass in. A few other features of the building as I continue on. A lot of our wood was actually harvested from our property and trees that came down from storms. So rather than go out and buy all of the wood for our baseboards, we used live edge wood that wood came down and we had milled and dried on site before it was installed in the building. We also reused. We salvaged barn wood out of an old barn in Marion that had to come down for a road expansion project. We had a whole group of volunteers that went out and actually took down this barn that's in the picture, and then we reused that throughout the space in the building. A little nod to the heritage of growing up in a dairy barn as an organization, but then also making sure that we're focused on reuse and recycling. This is just an inside picture of our main exhibit hall as you walk in. A lot of access to light, to windows, to fresh air, really focused on how can we make sure that walking into this building, people can see outdoors but also see sunlight. We're not a museum. You asked a few minutes ago about what a nature center is, and while you may travel and see nature centers that have a lot of millions of dollars in exhibits, we're not a museum by definition. And so while we have a few exhibits that are really impactful, we are designed, all of our inside space is designed to get people outside and support them while they are outside. Here's a view of our outside patio during one of the opening weekends, I believe it is, and it has a reconstructed wetland on the property. But this, I'm going to get back to the water conversation now for a few minutes. So in addition to amazing space, capturing all of its water, this wetland is actually fed by roof water. We are in the middle of a prairie that was restored back in the 80s. And I want to take a moment just to talk about the importance of prairies. And forgive me if many of you already know this, but there are so many important reasons why prairie and native species are beneficial for our habitat. Iowa, before the agricultural age, so about 150 years ago, we'll call it, was filled with prairie. And those prairie roots extend about 12 feet deep into the ground. Many people don't know that, but prairie roots extend about 12 feet deep. And they're a mass and an intertwined root system. And as you have that, you create roots that hold tremendous amount of water and hold soil in place from eroding. So 150 years ago, our landscape was full of prairie that prevented erosion, that decreased flooding, that captured rainwater runoff, and managed water naturally. As we have become more of an agricultural society, as we've had more suburbia, you start to see the plants on the left come up, and you can see the difference in roots. And so whether it's turf grass, daylilies, I love daylilies. This is not a slight against daylilies, but as you see non-natives come up, just take a look for a moment at the difference in the root systems. Now imagine you have water going through the ground. On the left-hand side, and you could also, I don't have this up there, but you could also put corn and soybean roots on the left-hand side that don't get very deep at all. Imagine the amount of water that doesn't have a place to go if those roots aren't sucking it up. Imagine the soil that is not being held in place by the non-native roots. So you have, on the right-hand side, you have a root system full of grasses and plants that are native have very diverse, complex, and deep root systems. So when we talk about the magic of why Iowa is experiencing more flooding and more erosion, it's very simple. We've transitioned our landscapes from the right to the left, and we have not given our water any place to go. So for us as an organization, whether it's management of water in the amazing space, whether it's the wetlands and the ponds that we've created back in the 90s, or whether it's the rainwater, the wetland septic system that we created at the barn. So many different strategies that have been put in place that can be replicated by the Indian Creek Nature Center to solve these problems.
Well, and I just add to that, and whenever you educate people about this, you have the opportunity to have that solution spread beyond your nature center.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a lot of what we try to do, is make sure that we're giving folks practical reasons to, and ways that they can do some of this work in their own homes. So although not everybody may go out and build a commercial building like Amazing Space or the Penrock Farm, they can do some of these practices at home. But as Indian Creek Nature Center grew, and I shouldn't say grew, as Indian Creek Nature Center continued to focus on these programs, we knew that sustainability in the built environment was only one part of our work. And serendipitously, about 2016, we were offered a donation of 190 acres of farmland north of Marion. So someone asked about it, is our property contiguous? We actually have 190 acres of land that is north of Marion. The main Nature Center property, being about 230 acres, is on the southeast side of Cedar Rapids, if you've been there before. So these are separated by about 25 miles. But we knew that as this gentleman, George Etzel, was looking to pass on his family farm, he had no heirs to leave it to, that it was a great opportunity for us to expand our capability to participate in sustainable agriculture, what's become known as regenerative agriculture. Agriculture that doesn't take nutrients from the environment, but puts nutrients back in. So everything from the water conversation we were having a few minutes ago to looking at the soil health and the organic compounds in the soil, how can we continue to build those? So this property is actually where the Nature Center has an entire team devoted to regenerative organic research in partnership with a number of organizations throughout the state and nationally. So organizations such as the Iowa Organic Association, Practical Farmers of Iowa, the Rodale Institute, which many people may know from the Rodale Press. Rodale Press was a book publishing company that was a leader in organic farming in the 1940s and 50s. And so our goal as part of this property was to create regenerative organic agriculture. And so we continue to work on a variety of different things. In fact, one of the most significant things we have right now is continuing our long-standing education about backyard chickens and how you can keep backyard chickens in your suburban neighborhood. We also have an organic chicken flock of about 80 hens, and that is an organic certified flock where we not only teach people, but we produce organic eggs that we're able to sell through our gift shop or sell through wholesale to other places. And in fact, we've been immune to the recent egg price increases. So I don't know if you've had to go to the grocery store and see egg prices, but you can now buy our organic eggs cheaper than you can buy just a normal dozen eggs in the grocery store right now.
Where can we get them locally?
Locally, our eggs are just organic eggs.
No, your eggs.
Ooh, that's a great question, and I don't have a good answer for that. But I need to figure out an answer for that, don't I?
Love to know.
Okay, I'm gonna ruminate on that and figure out a solution there. This is not a picture of our farm, but it is a picture of a farm that is a vision for us. So this, what you see this picture here is you see small fields of diverse crops. You don't see one large 1,000-acre field of corn. You see everything from flowers and vegetables to livestock that's integrated with agriculture, just smaller fields. And what the goal of this type of agriculture is to still produce the amount of food that we need, but to do it in a manner that restores the soil, prevents water runoff, and increases the carbon matter within the soil. And there's a whole lot of reasons I can get into for that I probably don't have time for today.
Where is that farm at?
I believe this is actually a farm in France, if I remember right. And it is a permaculture farm that has been operating, I think it was for about 20 years in France. That's about as detailed as I can give you right now.
What's a permaculture farm?
Permaculture is essentially integration of multiple crops into one area. And so, as an example, our main field that we've planted at Edsel Sugar Grove Farm is a 10-acre field which includes 200 different nut fruit trees, commingled with non-food sources such as willow, which we grow and harvest and sell, switchgrass, and prairie, along with in between the orchard rows, we have everything from garlic and onions and peppers and all different types of organic produce. It's a fully certified organic field that we also harvest, and we sell through our shop. I don't have the out-of-city answer for the produce either, but I will add that to the chicken list if desired. This is a relatively new endeavor for us since 2016, and so new that the trees that we have planted have not started become close to harvest yet. So we're about 5 years or so into what we planted there and expect it'll take another 5 years or so before we're able to harvest multiple crops. But the ultimate goal here is to generate the same amount of revenue as you would per acre in a traditional farm, in a corn or soybean farm. So if you look at per acre costs of corn, that's our goal for generating revenue in a permaculture field. Yes?
And what would you do with the money? You know, you're making money
Yep.
with a nonprofit. Ideally, that's what you're aiming for. And what do you do with that? Plow that back into the organization?
Yep. So we use that specifically for education. And putting it back into the organization's educational programs, research programs, and partnerships with it, which expand the message. So for us, the only reason that we want to match that per acre cost of a traditional farm is to show other farmers that transitioning to this way of agriculture can actually be profitable. For us, we of course have to pay staff and pay the bills, but at the end of the day, a farmer has to pay their mortgage payment. They have to pay their debt on their tractor, which are hugely expensive anymore. They have to pay to feed their family and to live. And so if the conversation with farmers is about, do we transition into organic agriculture and make less money, that's not a proposition which goes very far. So education and proving to farmers that these agricultural principles can continue to be as profitable is an important piece for us. So we're reinvesting into the education mission of the Nature Center with those proceeds. I'm going to transition off the farm. I could do a whole program just on our farm agriculture, but I do want to hit a few other things. Are there any questions before I leave the farm? Okay. So, yes, ma'am.
Where exactly is this farm?
This farm itself is in France. Our farm, which I had, is north of Marion, about 30 minutes north of Cedar Rapids, if you will.
Yeah, I grew up north of Marion, that's why.
Okay, so I can get really specific.
I grew up on a farm where the Indian Creek was going through.
Okay, so this farm is right by Lafayette, which is outside of Alphabet. Lafayette is you sneeze and you drive through it. It's got like 2 buildings, but it's the closest incorporated area is Albernet. It's about 3 minutes from Albernet. If you're familiar, I'll go one step further. If you're familiar with the Tuma Soccer Complex on County Home Road, it's a mile from that soccer complex. So March of 2020 was when the pandemic hit. And the pandemic was impactful for the Nature Center. We certainly had to shut down programs. We canceled our Maple Syrup Festival. We had people work from home. But what was interesting is we actually saw April come around. After the first 2 weeks or so of the shutdown, April came around at the Nature Center. Our programs weren't happening. Our building wasn't open. But I would still go in there, we still have property maintained, we can't shut everything down. And we left our trails open. And what we saw in April of 2020 was the busiest month on the Nature Center's trail system that we probably ever saw. The parking lot was packed with cars day in and day out. I think for 2 reasons. First, is because nobody else was open. And so the trail system was what you could do safely with your family unit outside. Second is because it was a time of incredible stress in many people's lives. And many people sought nature, trails, and the outdoor as respite. And they did so because they knew what many studies, including one recently from Harvard, have proven, that as little as 20 minutes of time spent outdoors increases the cortisol levels in your brain. And cortisol is responsible for stress reduction. And so just 20 minutes outside in a natural setting increases cortisol levels, decreases stress, and improves one's mental health. So it's no surprise to me, knowing that study, that April was an extremely busy month for the Nature Center. People out hiking on trails, enjoying the outdoors, using that as a respite. May continue that way. We started to kind of get back up. The pandemic did not have a really negative impact. We didn't have field trips and programming, but financially there was enough for us to be able to make it through. We have, through some really great past leadership, we have financial reserves, we have endowment. We're an organization that doesn't believe that or believes that you do save for a rainy day, and so we had some of those things to live on. But more importantly, we saw people using the Nature Center really significantly during the pandemic. And then what was without a doubt the most significant event in the Nature Center's history during my time or any other time was the 2020 derecho. The derecho that came through hit both our farm and the Nature Center in a manner that caused us to shut down the entire property, not just the buildings, but the entire property, for about 2.5 months. We are an organization, as I mentioned, of 500 acres of land, 400 of which, a little less than 400 of which, is wooded. We saw the same 65 to 70% of tree destruction that the rest of the city of Cedar Rapids saw. That was devastating to us as an organization. I could go through the initial response, but suffice to say, it took us several weeks to get to all of our property to really even survey the amount of damage that was done. Thankfully, the Penroth barn and the Amazing Space building were spared damage. However, several buildings at our farm were not as lucky. There were 2 historic barns and several silos that had to come down because they were damaged beyond repair. But more significantly is it shut down our property at a time when people needed nature. And so we had several ways that we could respond to that. First and foremost, we decided that everybody was all in. And so we, being a non-governmental organization, were not eligible for FEMA funding for our property. So all of our recovery over the past past few years has been privately funded, done mainly by our staff and volunteers, specifically going out and cutting. But for the first few weeks after the storm, 2 to 3 weeks or so, everybody was on cleanup crew. Accountants, marketing, volunteer, teachers, all of that they were all focused on one thing, and that was cleaning up. Once we had the initial damage kind of figured out and a few weeks into it, our education team came off of chainsaw duty, but they still didn't have programs. Our property was shut down, and our pandemic field trips were still not happening. So we knew that this was an opportunity. We were going to take the derecho as an opportunity, just as we did with the flood, to think about what can we as an organization do, how can we come away from this stronger than when we went into the derecho. And that proved to be extremely successful with the creation of the Creekside Forest School. Creekside Forest School is a natures-based preschool which serves 3- and 4-year-old children during the traditional school year in the traditional state licensed approved preschool program. It was an idea that we had wanted to bring to Iowa for a while. Natures-based preschools are actually very prevalent. They got their start in Norway, not Norway, Iowa, Norway the country, and they have traversed. They're very popular on the east and west coast. Even Minnesota has about 80 outdoor preschools. But Iowa was starkly devoid of many of them. And there's a few examples. Kinder Farm, if you're familiar with that, that was a kind of nature-based preschool. It was an outdoor farm-focused preschool. The Gooder program is based down in this area. That is a portion of that. So we knew that we wanted to continue to bring outdoor education. And what's different than our field trips here is with a field trip, you come out once a year for about 60 to 90 minutes as part of your schooling experience. This, your schooling experience, is in nature every day for the entire 9-month school year. So we took the derecho as an opportunity to launch this program, and we are in the middle of our second year of programming. We started the program with 2 half-day sessions, a morning session and an afternoon session, each serving about 14 children. Really didn't know if the community would respond well to this type of education. We opened up enrollment, and within just 2 weeks, both of our classes were full, and we had a waiting list. And to this day, we still have a waiting list of over 220 kids to come to this preschool. What's unique about this preschool is actually nothing to do with the buildings that I spent a lot of time on earlier in my presentation. It has to do with how do we get kids outside learning, and how do we do it in a manner that creates, at the youngest age, a spark in nature where they want to be outside more and more. And so they actually learn about the same preschool curriculum that you would learn anywhere. They learn their colors, they learn their numbers, but rather than learning their colors from a piece of paper inside, they're learning about their colors from the fall trees. They're learning about how the outdoors works. This, you probably can't read it, but the clipboard says sink or float, and they took acorns and they figured out which acorns sunk and which acorns floated, and how that actually translates to science principles and problem solving. And they're outdoors all year long. This is a great time. They were out sledding today, but they're outdoor all year round. You can see Morgan, one of our teachers, is reading a child a book, waiting for pickup, but they're doing everything outside. In fact, during our very first school year, the average amount of time that children were outside were 85% of their school day they spent outside playing. Most days, the only reason they have to come in is the bathroom, and some kids don't even have to come in for that. But having the opportunity to open this preschool has given us more and more immersive educational opportunities. still and will always provide field trips. We will always provide youth-based educational programs, but we also will provide immersive experiences in nature. The Creekside Forest School is one example of several different programs. We're currently piloting an after-school program where kids come after school and spend 3 hours at the nature center several days a week rather than going to a gym or someplace like that, or a daycare center. We are not a child care organization in this true sense of we're not here for you to drop your child off and be daycare. We are a learning, immersive organization which is designed to get kids outside and learn. And really, that's what it's all about for us. Whether you're a child who's 4 or a child who's 94, our goal is to get people outside, to educate people and to inspire people to create champions of nature. How we do that has changed and morphed over the years. The buildings that we do it in, the ground we do it on, all have changed and added and subtracted. But at the end of the day, our goal is to get kids outside to create champions of nature so that they have that spark in them that will live on as they grow older, so that they respect and protect the environment, so that they get their children outside, and so that they know and appreciate the importance of nature and the outdoors. So I would be glad to answer any questions that you may have. I'll go in the back first and then here. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned your solar field.
Yes.
How big is it?
We have 260 panels within our entire solar system. That includes the ones on the roof and the ones on the ground. The field area, I don't know that I have a good picture of it. It's probably about the size of a football field. However, I would add that our partnership with Alliant Energy is unique because we're not just doing the standard arrangement with them where they pay us a small amount for electricity. They actually installed several different types of mounts into our solar field, and they're doing research and testing which mounts are better for IO conditions. So we have, for example, panels that tilt just based upon the time of the year. So once a month, we tilt it every few degrees to account for the sun change in the sky. And we also have panels that will track every minute of the day will actually rotate with the sun so that it can maximize sunlight. So our field is a little bit larger than what you would normally do if you were going to power a building this size, but we're doing it because it provides the research for Alliant to figure out how best to install solar energy throughout the community. And in fact, if you are at all familiar with their community solar concept that they rolled out a few months ago, where individuals could buy into a large solar farm. I shouldn't say farm because it's a large base of solar panels. That was a direct result of research done at the Indian Creek Nature Center on our solar system, where they could then translate that to the real world, if you will say. I gave you a lot more details on the size. Any other questions I can answer on solar?
I just was curious about the acreage and the amount of energy produced off the acreage. Was that efficient use of the land?
Well, so I don't, that's probably a judgment call, but at the end, underneath those solar panels is buffalo grass. And buffalo grass was actually on this side of the screen that had roots that went down pretty deep. It is actually a native prairie plant. And so we have transitioned that from tall grass prairie to buffalo grass prairie. And so is it an efficient use of the land? It provides a learning education. There is signs about solar energy teaching people. There is actual solar production happening, and there's water capture and natural habitat that's provided by that field. So whether or not it's not in trails, it's not in development, whether or not it's the most productive use, I think it may be a judgment call, don't, from a solar perspective, because I've not had to do that, that's a great question. Mid-American actually provides natural gas to our barn, but they do not provide natural gas to this building because we made a determination that we would have no combustion, natural gas combustion, propane, LP, anything in this building so we weren't offsetting, or we weren't releasing carbon into the atmosphere. So we have an organization-wide goal to not work with Mid-American, not because of Mid-American, but because we want to get rid of all the gas on our property. But I don't have any further details about how they are with solar. I know that Mid-American and Alliance share some of the similar renewable energy goals for their entire portfolio. How they're implementing that, I don't know the differences.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if I can dream this, but I thought maybe I heard you say at that dinner we were at that you have a goal to expand the childhood education up into the early elementary levels?
Kindergarten at the very least.
Okay.
Maybe beyond. So I talked about those 200 children on the waiting list. We have, more important than attendance goals, we actually have some pretty deep equity goals around what the makeup of our school is. Because of the nature of costs of running a school and a child care organization, it is not a cheap endeavor. However, with the 28 children that we have enrolled right now, it fully pays for itself. So we do not rely on any donor dollars to fund the preschool operations. It is funded by tuition. However, that means that there are a number of folks who cannot access our school for cost, but there's actually other reasons that are just as much, if not more important than cost. One of the most significant issues with childcare is transportation. And so being able to get people to the school. We are not on a bus route. Most nature centers are not on bus routes by nature of who we are. We cannot rely on daycare providers or other schools. And so we said, about a year ago about this time, we said to ourselves, well, we have to solve the solution. If we want an equitable access to our school, we have to solve transportation. And so we did that by seeking out a grant, and I'm happy to share that we are going to be adding a 26-passenger bus to the Nature Center's fleet that is 100% electric. So a fully electric bus that we can use to go out and transport kids either from their house or from other daycare centers to come and attend the Nature Center program. So financial transportation, another big barrier for attendance at our school is gear. And so I don't have, you can see here the gear that each of these three are wearing are actually provided at no charge to the families by the Nature Center. So this is Patagonia gear that we worked with several donors to buy complete sets of the gear for children. So no matter your income level, when you come to this school, you have everything you need to be outside. Think about a day like today, you need to have the right gear to be outside. There's no bad weather, just bad gear. So we give the kids the right gear that they need. The final and most significant barrier to attendance at our school and growing to serve those kids on the wait list is half-day, full-day programs. There are a number of families that can only access our school if there are two parents and one is a stay-at-home parent to provide transportation, to provide access. We know that that's a barrier. We knew we couldn't start a perfect school day one. However, we are looking at an expansion project over the next few years that allows us to provide a full-day school program with full transportation, full gear, and scholarship programming through endowed funds so that we can actually grow the attendance of the school from 28 children to 100 children in full-day and half-day preschool and full-day kindergarten. The barriers to that come down to facilities. Even though, the irony is, even though we're an outdoor nature preschool, we still have to follow state licensing guidelines, which requires a minimum amount of indoor square footage space for every child. We cannot take any more space in our current building in order to expand that program, because we still have other programs we have to implement. So we are actually looking at our aging facility, our 90-year-old dairy barn, and looking at ways that we still use that today. So if you come out for our maple syrup programs in March, you will go to that facility and you will learn how to make maple syrup. We use that for our summer camps. It's used regularly, but we are looking at how can we expand that, take the 91-year-old building that's showing its age and invest in it, improve it, turn it into a spot where we can grow this preschool for the future. And that would include kindergarten, tremendous amount of requests for early elementary as well, first, second, third, fourth. We're not making a commitment yet as to whether or not we'll be able to do that, but so many people want to get their kids engaged outdoors. Yes, ma'am.
Do you do any on-site bus tours with guides?
Not specifically bus tours. We host a wide variety of communities, retirement communities and others who actually come out and actually tour the buildings, the grounds immediately proper to this. These are all fully accessible facilities, and our immediate trails right around the buildings are accessible. So we have programs that come out, and we can do everything from your plants and animals and snakes programs to your just general tours of the facilities and the buildings as part of that, if you will. But it does require coming into the space, if you will.
So only the one location at the center itself, not throughout the entire property?
Yeah, bus tours would not be feasible for that, but we do have guided hikes, which is probably not quite what you were asking, but we do have guided hikes throughout the entire property as well that we have regularly scheduled with our naturalists. There's one main road that goes through our campus, but it's hard to get off of on a vehicle. Yes, sir.
We've got a lot of clay underneath our black dirt. Do the prairie grass shoot the roots down into the clay?
They can, yes. And in fact, prairie grasses are extra good and adept at doing that. The black dirt is eroding away, as many of you may know, and so, but prairie grasses are great. It takes time. So we restored our prairies, most of them back in the 80s, to start with, the 80s and 90s. We just started actually a new one last year. But it takes time for those roots to be able to get down and get that deep, but they can go through the clay, yes. Yes, ma'am?
Does the solar totally heat and cool that building?
It powers the geothermal system, which heats and cools that building. So we use a ground source, the heat and the cool from the ground. So essentially, there's a whole bunch of pipes under this field right here that you can't see that we run what is essentially an antifreeze solution through those pipes. And if you're not familiar with geothermal, in the winter, actually, ironically, it picks up the heat from the ground. There's a lot of heat that's captured. I think our system is between 15 and 45 feet down. There's a lot of heat that's captured, that's pulled in that antifreeze, and then we pull that heat into the building this time of year. And then there's a lot of cool that's trapped in the winter, in the summertime, right, that we use to cool as well. So we actually, the solar powers that system, and that is our only source of heating and cooling is that geothermal. Interestingly enough, I'm also often asked about solar thermal water heating. So do we have, say, the sun helping to heat our hot water? And the answer is no, because interestingly, when you build a building that is as sustainable as ours, you actually get to a point where you don't have to have every single appliance be completely energy efficient. So solar thermal water heating would have added another $150,000 or so to the project. But for another as an example, for another 25,000 in solar panels, we could add in electric water heaters, and it would be a cheaper solution. So there's other things like that, gray water reclamation, so taking water from sinks and using it in toilets that we didn't do, radiant floor heating, which helps to heat from the ground up, because we determined that with a more modest investment in solar, you don't have to make a more complicated investment in other systems that ultimately end up breaking anyway. Other questions? Well, I'm happy to answer any more that you have. I will just leave you with a few of our upcoming events that we have. This Saturday, actually, we have an event about trumpeter swans. Trumpeter swans, if you're not familiar, were actually almost extinct in the United States. They were down to 60 pair of swans in the entire United States. And over the past 100 years, they were completely gone from Iowa. Over the past 100 years, there's been a lot of habitat management to bring them back. Now the trumpeter swan population is extremely healthy. We're partnered with several state and national folks to have a trumpeter swan soiree, which is a Saturday afternoon. It is a celebration, an educational session on trumpeter swans. You'll be able to come to our property and actually see a mounted trumpeter swan. And then if, as part of the program, you get free entrance to Kirkwood, who actually has a mating pair of trumpeter swans on the property. February 18th, we have a Backcountry Film Festival. So if you're like outdoor winter sports at all, or even if you like watching films about outdoor winter sports, you can come on Saturday and see that. It is a collection of, I think, about 9 short films, all about winter activities, winter recreation, getting outside, everything from skiing, downhill and cross country to snowshoeing, which I didn't mention. We rent snowshoes as well at the Nature Center. So just more ways to get people outside. March 25th and 26th is our 40th annual Maple Syrup Festival. And that is a culmination of our syrup season, which actually starts in just a few weeks, in which we will tap trees. We will teach thousands of kids how to tap trees, and we will make our own maple syrup. So at the festival, we serve about 3,000 people typically in a 2-day period, and we serve pancakes with our own maple syrup while also educating folks how to tap a tree and how to pull out that sap and turn it into syrup. And then finally, October 14th, a few months from now, is our actual formal 50th anniversary celebration, where we'll have bands and food and drink. And actually, at that point, we will more than likely unveil our plans for the future and our plans for an expanded preschool at that event as well. So these are just a sampling of what we have on our website. We have a full calendar of events, and you are welcome to come visit any time. I'm thankful for you having me here tonight and for the opportunity, third time's a charm, to come down and speak to you. And I'm grateful for Sarah's invitation and Oak Hill for having me. Lindsay, thank you. Any final questions before I close out? Yes, ma'am.
Where's the other nature center in Iowa? You said there were 2.
Yeah, the other nonprofit is one called Nahant Marsh near Davenport. It is an outdoor environmental center, Nahant Marsh, which is actually a public-private partnership nature center, and they do a lot of education. There is, I would be remiss if I didn't also mention some of the government-funded centers. Jester Park Nature Center in Des Moines is a beautiful place. If you ever make your way over to Des Moines, it's a great organization. Davenport is a great one. And then there's a handful of other ones scattered throughout the state. Whatever you do, just get outside and enjoy some time with that vitamin D enriching sun. Any other questions? Thank you so much for your time today.